So in this video, we're going to see the last argument the descriptive egoist makes in favor of their view by appealing to these ideas about the social contract and the prisoner's dilemma. So we know this wants argument for descriptive egoism, and the question is, can the descriptive egoist give us an argument for premise 2, you always most want to do what is most in your self-interest? And it looks like we act altruistically, and so the descriptive egoist needs to say that's a false appearance, and their last attempt to do that is to say that this altruism, apparent altruism, is disguised egoism to protect your reputation in a social contract. And that's why you do it. You do it to maintain your social standing, so you get the benefits of the social contract, and not out of any desire to assist others. It's for your own. When you do these things that are help others or don't harm others, it's still also most beneficial for you because it preserves your position in the social contract. Reputation is a very substantial egoistic motivation, right? You benefit from the contract by maintaining your reputation, and the descriptive egoists think that's the essential reason why we act in altruistic ways. And this is what the point of the ring of GYGES example is that we get in the Plato reading. So that reading is a dialogue written by Plato. One of the characters is Glaucon, who puts forward this suggestion. And Glaucon and Plato don't in the end agree with the suggestion. They think that humans are capable of acting altruistically, but they're putting it forward to evaluate it. So that goes like this. We have a farmer who doesn't apparently act purely egoistically. It looks like the farmer acts altruistically. They, don't harm their fellow citizens. But this farmer finds a ring of invisibility. It can turn him invisible when he rotates it and make him visible when he unrotates it. And on finding that, he starts acting evilly. So he sneaks into the palace. He kills the king. He seduces the queen. I'm not sure how the invisibility is supposed to help with that, but that's the story. And he becomes the king, and he's a bad person or acting in bad ways. And the idea is that this ring hasn't changed his character. It's only allowed him to act in the ways he always really wanted to act, and was only holding back because he cared about his reputation in the social contract, right? His only reason for acting morally was the reputational benefit. And so the farmer is really egoistic. Why did the farmer act altruistically before finding the ring? So that because it was in his benefit, because it got him the benefits of the social contract by maintaining his reputation. But once he gets the ring, then he starts acting egoistically. And why? Well, again, because it's in his benefit as he sees it. What's changed? Well, he can get the benefits of violating the social contract now, and he also gets the benefits of the social contract because he maintains his reputation, because he's invisible when he does the stuff that would damage his standing in the contract, because he has the ring of invisibility. So his actions don't affect his reputation because he's invisible. And so the idea is you let someone, you say, here's a member of the social contract, and they're acting in accord with the social contract, so they're not harming others, they're helping others. Why are they doing that? Are they doing that because they think, in fact, they should help others, they should not harm others, or is it only because they care about their position in the contract? And the idea is that, at least with the farmer, he was helping others and not harming them only because he cared about his position in the contract. And we see that once he gets the ring of invisibility and violating the social contract won't hurt his reputation anymore, then he says, I now have no problem with violating the social contract. All I cared about was my reputation, and so now I'm going to go and harm others, because doing so will not hurt my reputation because I'm invisible. So the descriptive egoist thinks, really, we're all the farmer. We're all purely egoistic. Our major motivation, in fact, our sufficient motivation for acting in ways that help others and don't harm others, for acting in those ways that benefit others, is just the reputational benefit that we get. And that supports premise 2 of the wants argument, right? The idea here is, yes, apparent altruism is actually disguised egoism. We're doing it only so that we can get the social benefit, so that we can, and to get the moral good feelings and avoid the moral bad feelings. But most importantly, we're doing it so that we can maintain in good standing in society, so that we can be protected and not be punished. That's the idea. So all this, what looks like selfishness, or what looks like altruistic, other-oriented action, is actually selfish. So is that plausible? Well, I think it's certainly plausible that a lot of the time that's part of the reason why we help others and don't harm others. And in some cases, it may be that if we that that egoistic motivation is essential, that if our action, we help others and don't harm others in order to maintain our standing, and if a helping action wouldn't increase our standing, or a harming action wouldn't decrease our standing, if the helping and the harming isn't affecting our standing, then we wouldn't do the helping, we would do the harming, because the only reason we were doing it was to protect our standing. And once our standing isn't going to be impacted anymore, then we go ahead and don't help others and do harm others. Certainly, it's plausible that that there are many situations where that's true. But the descriptive egoist has to say that's always the case, that no matter what, there's no genuine altruism, that the only genuine that when it looks like there's genuine altruism, it's done to maintain social standing. And that really strong claim that it's always done to maintain social standing, and without that gain in social standing, the altruistic act wouldn't be done, that's not so plausible. Again, just think of the self-sacrifices cases where the soldier sacrifices their life for their comrades. They don't get any benefit out of it because they're dead. What loss would they get? I mean, you can be a soldier in very good standing and not sacrifice yourself to save your buddies, and you don't lose the protection of your comrades. So in that case, and even you don't even lose their respect necessarily. And so because those actions are considered sort of above and beyond, so you don't do them, you're still a good soldier in your comrades' eyes. And so in that case, the self-sacrifice is not done to protect one's social standing. It's done to help the others. If all you cared about was your social standing, you wouldn't sacrifice yourself in those ways. And that just scales down to less extreme cases where, when a parent helps their child, for example, that's not done, probably, saves their child. Or when an adult, I don't know, I read a story maybe within the last month, about a crossing guard who, for elementary school, saw a car coming, saw a child on the way, ran in front of the car and shoved the child out of the way and was killed. And that's real. And that person did that, and that was a profound self-sacrifice. And what was their social standing going to be afterwards if they hadn't thrown themselves in the way of the car? It would not have been ruined. And so in these cases of self-sacrifice, that's not what's going on, and we can imagine lesser cases of that as well, where we help someone, we pay back, go out of our way to help someone in a way that maybe doesn't totally benefit us, may not have much of a benefit in terms of our social standing. So in these cases, it looks like people do not behave the way that the farmer who found the ring of GYGES did. Certainly there are some people who would behave that way, but there also are people who don't, and that means that it's descriptive egoism is definitely not true of everybody. And what Mengzi would tell us is that those people, like the farmer, who in fact end up acting very egoistically and harming others, that their sort of default, sort of the way in which it's the nature of an acorn to grow into a tree, it was the nature of that farmer to care about others. But just like a tree can be stunted, so that farmer's moral development was stunted. And so not only is it that some of us are capable of these really extreme self-sacrifices, but that's human nature, just in the way that an acorn wants to grow into a tree, or wants to. It's in its programming to. So similarly, it's part of our nature to care for others, to respect others, and that it's only when our environment has negatively affected us that other forces in us are able to really become more powerful, and we start acting in really egoistic ways. So there are lots of counterexamples where the egoistic concern for reputation cannot explain why we help others. And so the universal farmer hypothesis, I think, is false, but it's important to see that there are these egoistic reasons nonetheless for acting in many cases to benefit others and not harm others. So I think we can see that descriptive egoism has a lot of problems. So I want to wrap up this discussion of the prisoner's dilemma and the social contract and descriptive egoism, and then in the last video in this module we'll talk a little bit about ethical egoism. So, prisoner's dilemma: in some situations, each participant is better off if he defects, but defecting harms the other more than it benefits the defector. If all defect, the group as a whole is worse off. if all are loyal, the group as a whole is best off. But the problem is if each person pursues their self-interest, we end up in that worst off situation because each participant is better off if he defects. So how do we get out of a prisoner's dilemma? Well, the social contract. So each agrees to be somewhat altruistic and not entirely egoistic if all the others are also. And we have some way of determining how other people are acting and enforcing this contract. Then it's in my self-interest to join because I avoid the harm from others. I give up being able to harm others, but the gain I got from harming others is much less than the harm that they can do to me, and so it's worth it to me to be protected from them, even though just from my limited sort of self-interested perspective, I do have a cost that I can no longer harm others. So what's most to my benefit, though, is if I cheat without being detected, like I have in Ring of Invisibility, I gain from my violent egoism, because I can harm you, and I gain from your following the contract because you don't know that I'm the one who's violating the contract, and so I don't get punished. So that's to my benefit, and so it's important to maintain a social contract that there be effective ways of determining who is violating it or not, if it's going to be maintained. And there can be social contracts at all different levels. There can be contracts within the family, contracts between people at in any sort of organization, up to the level of contract between everybody ruled by a given government. And you can think of the government as the sort of we all get together and form a social contract, and the government is what carries out our social contract. Now, whether or not that's an accurate image of our government in any sense, or whether or not how we should think about histories of racism and oppression and so on, while does it make sense to have, once we're aware of those, to think of our government as a social contract? That's a question that we'll be coming back to later. For right now, we want to wrap up also descriptive egoism. So we see that when we understand what we mean by want as just are motivated, then the second premise of this argument does not succeed. We do, it certainly seems, have altruistic motivations. I am motivated to help or respect others, and I will go so far as to actually sacrifice my self-interest to at least some degree in carrying out those motivations. I'm not, when I act altruistically, there may be some I may be acting partially to get the good moral feelings and avoid the bad moral feelings. I may be acting partially to maintain or promote my social standing, but in lots of cases, that's not enough to explain my altruism or yours. When I act to benefit, when you act to help or not harm others, in many cases, you're also genuinely motivated out of a concern for the other, and the act is not entirely in your self-interest, although it may help you a little bit in certain ways. So, now, the descriptive egoist might not agree with that conclusion, and they might think, no, I can really show that, in fact, you really are always acting in your own self-interest. But I think we can see that that's not an easy argument or claim to establish. So that's what we have to say about descriptive egoism. In the last video in this module, we're going to talk briefly about ethical egoism, and then in the next module, we are going to be on to some theories about if ethical egoism is wrong, what are our ethical duties, what is of value, what should and shouldn't we do.